there, Daniel Lowrie here from Antisyphon Training, and here we're going to talk to you a little bit today about taking good lecture notes. That's right, you've probably said a lecture once or twice in your life. Some of them were fun, some of them were probably not, but that's neither here nor there. Ultimately, at the end of the day, if I was at a lecture where I was actually trying to learn something, taking a good set of notes is going to be imperative for making sure that that knowledge makes its way into the dome. That's right. So how do we do that? Well, there's a few methods for making that happen. One of them is just write down anything you hear and see, but that's not typically very effective. It's kind of a scattergun approach. It's kind of a very disorganized. And maybe that really works for you, but a lot of people find that to not work after the fact. It seems great when you're doing it, but a more structured method, a more organized method, actually at the end of the day, after the lecture is over and you come back to your notes, tends to be a little more useful in the long run. So I'm going to give you a couple of methods in which we can use for actually taking notes during a lecture when you're trying to learn something. You're hearing a speaker deliver information and you're trying to get that onto a note page so that ultimately it gets there into the old noggin. So what are these different methods? Well, we're going to take a look at the outline method, the Cornell method, as well as mind mapping. Let's start with the outline method. The outline method is also known as the alphanumeric method, and for good reason, because we tend to use alphanumeric symbols for delegating different headers and sections and subsections and so on and so forth. It is probably the most common method of note-taking, right? It's got a very structured format, it's very logical in its layout, and if you've ever looked at something like a textbook, this is going to be actually very familiar to you, right? And a lot of us have looked at books, textbooks specifically, and we've seen this structure, and we've probably even used something similar to it in our day-to-day lives. Like I said, it's probably the most common method used for taking notes. So let me show you what I mean. Let me jump into my computer here. And here I've taken some notes on cross-site scripting, right? I've got this whole title page going on here, but then we start with our first section. This is a major section, so it starts with a capital I, which is the Roman numeral I, or not Roman numeral. It is a Roman numeral for the number 1, which is the letter I. That is not confusing at all when you're trying to say it out loud, but this is kind of fun. So here we have, this is for reflected cross-site scripting or non-persistent. As we scroll down a little bit, we see our first subsection, which is titled with the capital letter A, and it gives the description. I have a few subsections here like attack flow, and you'll notice that that is the letter B. We've also got common targets, which is the letter C, and then impact, which is the letter D. So those are going to be my first subsection under my main section, which is reflected cross-site scripting. Now we move into even further subsections, and you'll notice that those are delineated by the numeric character 1. Right, the actual normal character 1 that we're used to seeing. And it says user supplied input is reflected back in the response without the proper validation or encoding. You notice I got more detail here. That's kind of the important piece of the puzzle that we go on. I also got another piece of good detail when it comes to the description of a reflected cross-site scripting attack. Payload is delivered via URLs or form submissions, right? So we start to see how more detail gets put in the more we subdivide down into these sections. If I had even further sections, I would do a lowercase I, or I'm sorry, A. It would be a lowercase a underneath there, and so on and so forth, right? So, and I could see this, I did this with attack flow, I did the same thing, giving more detail, more information, and as you drill down into further subsections, that's how that's going to look. And this is, like I said, it is the most common type of method for note-taking that you've probably seen, and you've probably done a little bit of it yourself. So hopefully this isn't too unfamiliar when it comes to the territory. Now, let's move on to the Cornell method. Maybe not something you've actually heard of before, but it's actually a really cool way to take good notes. Let me jump back into my PC here, and let's take a look at the Cornell method. And I've just kind of pulled this up and created this in a text file, because normally you'd probably be writing this down on a piece of paper. Now, if you got your paper out, what you're going to do is you're going to divide it right down the middle or somewhere near, and you're going to have different sections. Now, I have created a whole, title page area, and then over here on the left, we've got cues. This is the formats, how this is divided up in this Cornell. This is, by the way, it was developed by Cornell University, hence the name, the Cornell method. So you got, on your left side, you got cues. On the right side of the line, you've got your notes. And then at the very bottom, you've got your summary. And the reason that this is such an effective method is because on my notes side, which is where I'm going to spend most of my time, I am going to put in those really, that's where I'm going to put the detail, but it doesn't need to be super detailed. This is where you kind of want to just put the gist of what's being said in a note. Now we bop over here to the cues side of things, and we have, how does this happen, right? This is a question. This is where I put questions about my notes, or maybe things that I need to further investigate, like how do I protect against, because in this note it says, can lead to data exposure, data loss, and even full system compromise when it comes to a command injection vulnerability. That's what this is all about, obviously. How do I protect against that? So these are on the cue side, it's where I'm going to ask myself questions, give myself cues of further investigation into the notes so that I learn about that a little more organically. This is a really good way to take quick notes and to still give you a great way of interacting with the speaker and the information that's being talked about. And then at the very end, you have the summary, right? It says command injection vulnerabilities are when apps treat user input as an OS command instead of text, which can lead to full system compromise. Again, it's going to be very succinct. It's going to be very small. It's going to be straight to the points. And basically, it's going to be the, what did you learn? What's the big picture? If I was looking at all my notes in the notes section, what's going to be the big picture takeaway? That's what I want to kind of drill down into, maybe 3 sentences, maybe 4 sentences, no more, in kind of, if I can do that, then I've done a really good job of understanding what's being said in the lecture. All right, so there's the Cornell method. I hope you like that one. It's really cool. This leads us to our very last method, which is going to be mind mapping. If you've never heard of mind maps, these are really cool and actually very touted by a lot of very smart people. They use them. They say this is the most effective way of taking notes. I will say it is also probably the most difficult to understand and the most difficult to implement, because it takes a little bit of time of getting used to. It takes a little bit of practice of playing around with before you gain some type of mastery with it, where the other 2 methods are kind of, you should probably be able to jump into those fairly quickly and utilize that. Mind mapping, as I said, can be all very, very useful, but it can also, like I said, be a little bit difficult. So let's jump into mind mapping, kind of see what this looks like. And this ought to be a lot of fun. I do enjoy mind mapping. My mouse keeps disappearing on me. There it goes. So I just went into Canva and created a mind map. And you'll notice that there's more visual elements to this than what we saw with our others, which is mostly text-based kind of things going on. So this is a very organic way of taking notes. It is meant to it's trying to represent how your mind actually processes information. It does have a structure, and what we're looking at here, and I'll kind of blow this up here. Hopefully I can do that. Let's see here. There we go. And what's happening is let me move this around. I've got the main point right here in the middle. I can't get to it. It's trying to hide from me. There it is. The main point's in the middle, and then I have these subtopics that kind of shoot off as lines in other directions, right? So there are multiple elements to this thing, like words, but the cool thing about mind mapping is you can use things like bolding and colors and stuff to help emphasize or make points or draw your eye and show the flow with things like lines. I can just make connecting lines like I have here. I can use arrows, all sorts of fun stuff to help kind of move your mind in the way of what's going on. You can see I've got these connecting lines moving to each subtopic of cross-site scripting, kind of revisited that idea and came here. So I've got types, right? Okay, cool. I've got types. What kind of types are there? Well, I've got reflected, I've got DOM-based, I've got persistent. And you'll notice I also used images. And that's the great thing about doing mind maps is it's kind of this open forum for you to be able to make notes that are going to be very effective specifically for you. So you could use images, you can make drawings, again, use colors and bolding and anything that's going to push the idea across. I really like the idea of using images because, as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? So this is kind of the real, and all of these are really practical and, they give you some hands-on ideas of how to take really good notes. So definitely play around with all of these. But like I said, I really like mind mapping. If you kind of get into it and you figure it out, it can be useful. You might just draw this on a piece of paper. It doesn't have to start off in something as professional as some sort of software application. But it does, at the end of the day, if you were to want to take this into creating a document, this mind map might be a nice addendum, appendix, or something to that. But I have all these different sections. I've got types, I've got testing, I've got impact. So under testing, I've got, I could do like an alert box with JavaScript, so I could throw my script tags in there. I could use an image that doesn't exist so that it kind of hides, or a lot of different ways I could use. I could add another element in here and say, maybe I'm going to use a polyglot to try to get past any kind of filtering. And these are all the things that kind of get used. Over here, I've got the different types of impacts that could be a part of this. So I see identity theft. You notice I put like a little thief there to really solidify my mind, call to a picture. Again, images are how my mind tends to work. So I like to associate images with the words. It really marries the two things together and helps me synthesize that so that I can apply it later. Got session hijacking. I put a little pirate hat on top of that because they like to hijack other boats and steal their booty, right? And then under here, we've got another impact, which is data exposure. So you got a confidential file with a magnifying glass over it. Again, trying to marry the idea that the image is meant to really stick in the brain toward the verbiage that's being used in the elements. So there you go. That's mind mapping. Again, can be a little more difficult to master, but once you do, it is primo. So hopefully that's helpful to you. If you're sitting in a lecture and you need to take some good notes, hopefully one of these methods is going to be really useful. And you've played around with a lot of them, figure out which one works for you and apply it to your life. That said, I got more to do, but I thank you for watching. I'm going to have more in this series to come, so be on the lookout for that. And until next time, have a great day.